Hello. This is a topic I've been thinking about a long time, and I've never actually seen anybody address it, but I think it's quite an important issue. It's about language learners and introverts versus extroverts. And I wonder whether we give language learning advice to people without considering whether those people are introverts or extroverts. Now, we have to first understand what we mean by those terms. A lot of people seem to think that saying somebody is an introvert is a negative thing. It's sort of a criticism of the person, and that people who are introverts have something that are wrong with them, that they're shy people, and that we should all want to be extroverts. But in fact, that's not actually what being an introvert is about. As always, I'll put a link to a Wikipedia page that talks a little bit about this, but my understanding is that, whoops, just have to adjust the light here a little bit. The difference is it's nothing to do with anybody being shy or anything like that. It's what you find energizing and what you find is draining of energy. So typically, somebody who is an extrovert finds social interaction very energizing and needs external stimulus outside themselves to feel energized. Whereas when they're alone, they feel their energy being drained away. So it's almost a need for social interaction. Whereas introverts, on the other hand, are energized by thinking and having ideas and creating things themselves. And they rely primarily on internal stimulus for this energizing, but they feel drained when they're in situations which don't allow this to happen. So if they're in cocktail parties, they often get bored because there's no internal stimulation, and they quickly feel drained and tired and just want to get out of there. So introversion, just like extroversion, is a preference. It's not a deficiency of anything, and often introverts are not shy. They're actually quite outgoing, but they just choose not to be in social settings because they don't particularly enjoy them. Okay, so this isn't true in every case, of course. If you have common interests with people and talk about those common interests, even for an introvert, that can be quite energizing. But to be put among strangers with nothing in common, there's nothing worse. So I have wondered often if we often see people who are extroverts as being better language learners because their social interaction means that they will speak a lot more to other people and therefore get a very good active vocabulary. I talked about the difference between active and passive vocabularies in a previous video. So it's possible that an extrovert, because they talk a lot, have very good active vocabularies. But it could be, and I've got no evidence of this, that introverts have big passive vocabularies because they spend a lot of time reading, thinking and listening rather than going out and talking to people. So there might be a lot under the surface for somebody who's introverted, and maybe for a person who's very extroverted, they have no big gap between their active and passive vocabulary. I don't know. It's just a guess. But everybody who has a big passive vocabulary experiences the frustration that they know a lot more than they can say. And so you often get introverts asking, how did you get such a good active vocabulary? And the problem I see is that very often the people who answer those questions are people with good active vocabularies, and quite often those are extroverts, people who say things like this. Get out there, talk to strangers at every opportunity, go to parties and start mixing with people, join clubs, chat online with people, make friends and meet up with them. Now these will sound like energizing things. The extrovert will think he's giving very positive advice that will energize people. But to an introvert, this is just going to be draining. They'll think, oh, they'll groan inside and not be able to follow up on this advice. So we can say, well, it's their fault. They need to get over their shyness and get out there. But it isn't a shyness, it's a preference. Extroverts might find these things energizing, introverts don't. Perhaps the last one, it depends on the topic. If you have some subjects that you're interested in, then a social setting can also provide internal stimulation because you're talking about stuff that you enjoy. But when it's on topics you don't enjoy, there's nothing worse than giving this advice. So, what kind of advice can we give to introverts? Now, by the way, on this scale here, there is a term called ambivert, and this is to show that most people are not on one of the scales. They're somewhere along the scale, and there are some perhaps mythical people who are in the middle, ambiverts, who don't find anything energizing. They just think it's okay being with people, it's okay thinking about ideas, but nothing's great. I think most people are lean towards one side or the other. So if somebody's on this side, of the scale, yes, get out there, get interacting at every opportunity, create this massive active vocabulary, maybe at the expense of a shallow passive vocabulary, I don't know. But people at this end of the scale, that advice is useless. There's no shyness to overcome usually. You're just telling them to do something they don't want to do. So what is good advice for introverts? And these are things that I have heard other people say, and I've actually tried some of these myself. Thinking and talking to yourself. The member Iva-san on the How to Learn Any Language forum talks about this quite a lot. He sits there and thinks through how he would say things and talks to himself about things. Many people do this, talking to yourself. I do this when I take daily walks. Every day I go for 2-hour walks, and I'm always thinking, usually in Czech, dialogues to myself and imagining conversations with people. This is one I've done a lot. Record videos just for yourself, where you narrate something. It can be any subject that interests you. Who knows what your interest is? Collecting butterflies, who knows? But just record yourself talking about these things. It'll force you to communicate. And if you like the videos, put them onto YouTube. If not, just keep them to yourself. But record yourself daily, let's say for 15 minutes, and you'll soon find that you're activating vocabulary. Find a study partner with shared interests. This can be very difficult because it's got to be somebody who is both interested in the language that you're interested in and has shared interests in butterfly collecting or whatever it is. But I had a study partner like this a few years ago. It was actually a woman who enjoyed hiking, and we studied Czech together, and I think it was very beneficial. Unfortunately, we're not studying together anymore. But here's one I also did. Pay a tutor to talk. That's where you give somebody money just to talk to you, not to give you lessons, but just to talk to you. And the important benefit of that is because they're being paid, everybody knows the purpose of it. It's not to talk about boring things, it's to stimulate your active vocabulary, and that can work quite well too. But to be quite honest, unlike videos where I can offer some advice, on this one I'm pretty stuck. I have to put a big question mark because I'm throwing this open to the language learning community. What advice is good and helpful to introverts to help them not overcome shyness? That's not what we want to do, because they don't have a shyness to overcome usually. They just don't want to be socially interactive. What advice can we give to enable people who are introverts to have a strong active vocabulary? I'm throwing this out to the community, so please put comments to the video, or even better, please make a response video and see if we can get the community talking about this issue, because I think it's an important one and one that's very much neglected. Thank you very much.